She had been a duchess for 6 months when she finally understood that her husband would never look at her the way she had once hoped. That evening, in the grand dining room of Ashworth Hall, Eleanor sat at the far end of the long mahogany table. 30 guests filled the space between them. Candlelight flickered against crystal glasses, laughter rose and fell in polite waves, and not once did the Duke of Ashworth turn his head in her direction. She was dressed in ivory silk, her dark hair arranged with pearls, her posture perfect. She had spent 2 hours preparing, hoping that tonight might be different, hoping he might notice. But when he passed her chair on his way to speak with Lord Whitmore, his eyes skimmed over her as though she were part of the furniture. An empty space, a silent ghost. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her wine glass. She did not cry. She had learned not to cry. Instead, she smiled at the elderly Baroness seated beside her and asked about the woman's grandchildren. The Baroness beamed. No one noticed the crack spreading through Eleanor's chest. This was her life now, Duchess of Ashworth, wife of the most powerful man in the county, and utterly, completely alone. The marriage had been arranged 6 months earlier. Eleanor's father, a widowed baron with failing lands and mounting debts, had received the offer like a miracle. The Duke of Ashworth, cold and unreachable as a winter star, had requested her hand. No courtship, no gentle words, just a business transaction signed in a study that smelled of old leather and candle wax. Eleanor had tried to find hope in it. She had seen his portrait once, years ago, and remembered thinking he looked like a man who carried the weight of mountains on his shoulders. She thought perhaps she could ease that burden. She thought perhaps, in time, he might learn to care for her. She had been terribly naive. Alexander Ashworth, the Duke of Ashworth, treated her with impeccable politeness and devastating indifference. He provided everything a duchess could want. Gowns, jewels, a private garden, a library filled with books. He never raised his voice. He never criticized her. He simply did not see her. Their conversations were brief, transactional. He asked about the household accounts. She answered. He nodded and returned to his study. She would watch him walk away, her heart aching, and tell herself that love took time, that patience would be rewarded. But patience had begun to curdle into something heavier, something that tasted like grief. The dinner ended. Guests departed into the cool autumn night. Eleanor stood in the entrance hall, bidding farewell with perfect grace, while Alexander stood 10 feet away doing the same. They were two parallel lines that would never meet. After the last carriage rolled away, he walked toward the staircase without a word. She watched his broad back, the straight line of his shoulders, the way his dark hair curled slightly at his collar. Her chest ached. She wanted to call out to him. She wanted to demand that he look at her, really look at her just once. Instead, she turned toward the servants' corridor to check on Cook's injured wrist. The housekeeper had mentioned it that morning. Cook was startled by the Duchess's visit but deeply grateful. Eleanor stayed for half an hour, applying a cool compress and listening to stories about Cook's granddaughter. The warmth of that small room felt more like home than any parlor in Ashworth Hall. Later that night, unable to sleep, Eleanor walked to the library. The fire had burned low. She lit a candle and reached for a volume of poetry when she heard voices through the partially open door of Alexander's study. His steward, Mr. Barnes, was speaking. "The arrangements have been finalized, Your Grace. The situation is contained." "Good," came Alexander's reply. His voice was so familiar and so distant all at once. "I have carried this burden long enough." Eleanor froze. "Does Her Grace know?" Barnes asked quietly. A long pause. Then Alexander's voice, heavy with something she could not name. "No, and she must not. The less she knows, the safer she remains. This marriage was never about what I wanted. It was a duty I accepted, a burden I will bear." The candle trembled in Eleanor's hand. A burden. She was a burden. She slipped away before she could hear more, her feet silent on the thick carpet. In her bedchamber, she sat on the edge of her bed and pressed her hand to her mouth. Her throat burned. Her eyes burned, but no tears came. She had been a fool, a hopeful, romantic fool. Alexander had never wanted her. He had married her out of obligation, some cold arrangement she did not understand. She was a weight around his neck, a duty to be borne. Something inside her shifted that night. It did not break, it did not shatter, it simply turned to stone. The next morning, Alina rose early. She dressed in a simple morning gown of dove gray and went to the breakfast room. Alexander was already there, reading a newspaper. He glanced up briefly, nodded, and returned to his reading. She did not linger. She did not attempt to fill the silence. She served herself tea, ate a small portion of toast, and left. In the days that followed, a new pattern emerged. Alina stopped waiting for her husband to notice her. She stopped positioning herself in rooms where he might pass. She stopped hopping for a glance, a word, a moment of warmth. Instead, she turned her attention outward. The Ashworth estate was vast, with dozens of tenant farms, a village, and a parish church that had fallen into gentle disrepair. Alina began visiting. She introduced herself to farmers' wives, learned their names, asked about their children. She discovered that the vicar's roof leaked and arranged for repairs. She sat beside an elderly woman named Mrs. Thistle who had not spoken to anyone in weeks. Word spread. The new Duchess was kind. The new Duchess listened. The new Duchess did not sit in her grand house and wait to be served. Alexander noticed the change without understanding it. He saw her less often. Her chair at dinner was sometimes empty because she was sharing a meal with a tenant family. Her music room was silent because she was teaching village children to read in the parish school. She was still graceful, still courteous, still every inch a duchess. But she was no longer waiting. He found himself unsettled. The silence of the house felt different now. Before, it had been a silence of anticipation, as though she might appear at any moment. Now it was a silence of absence. One afternoon, he was riding back from the northern fields when he saw her in the village square. She was kneeling on the cobblestones beside a small boy who had scraped his knee. Her dove-colored gown was streaked with dust. Her hands were gentle as she cleaned the wound. The boy's mother stood nearby, her face soft with gratitude. Alexander reined in his horse and watched. Alina did not see him. She was laughing at something the boy said, her face transformed, her eyes bright. In all the months of their marriage, he had never seen her laugh like that. The sight did something strange to his chest. He rode on without announcing himself. That evening, a new guest arrived at Ashworth Hall. Dr. Henry Whitfield was the son of a respected physician from the next county. He had come to establish a small practice in the village, and Alexander had agreed to let him stay in a cottage on the estate. The young doctor was handsome in an unassuming way, with warm brown eyes and a ready smile. He was gentle and intelligent and completely unaware of aristocratic pretensions. Alexander introduced him to Alina at dinner. Henry bowed, met her eyes, and immediately began talking about the village's need for a proper infirmary. Alina's face lit up with interest. Within minutes, they were deep in conversation about public health and the welfare of the tenants. Alexander sat at the head of the table, watching. He had not realized his wife knew so much about the estate. He had not realized she had such passionate opinions. He had certainly not realized that another man could make her smile so easily. Something hot and sharp flickered in his chest. He put down his fork and did not pick it up again. Jealousy arrived without warning. It did not announce itself with trumpets. It slipped in like a knife between his ribs and stayed there. As the weeks passed, Alina spent more time with Henry. He accompanied her on visits to sick tenants. He helped her organize a small dispensary in the village. He treated her not as a duchess but as a person, and that was something she had not realized she was starving for. She did not think of it as romantic attention. Henry was a friend. But Alexander, watching from windows and across dinner tables, saw something else entirely. The tension in the house grew thick. One evening, Alina returned from the village later than usual. The sky had turned dark, and a cold rain had begun to fall. She entered the entrance hall dripping wet, her hair plastered to her cheeks, her cloak heavy with water. Alexander was standing at the foot of the staircase, arms crossed, jaw tight. "Where have you been?" His voice was sharper than she had ever heard it. She paused, startled. "Mrs. Cartwright's daughter is unwell. I stayed to help prepare a fever tincture." "With Whitfield?" It was not a question. Alina lifted her chin. "Yes, he is a physician. His help was invaluable." Alexander took a step toward her. "You are my wife. You cannot wander the countryside at all hours with a man who is not your husband. People talk." Alina felt something harden inside her. "I was helping a sick child. If that causes talk, then those who talk are not worth my concern." She moved to walk past him. He caught her wrist gently but firmly. "Alina." She stopped. It was the first time he had spoken her name like that, softly, almost urgently. She looked up into his face. For a fleeting second she saw something behind his cold eyes, something raw, something desperate. Then it was gone. "Stay away from him," Alexander said quietly. She pulled her wrist free. "You do not get to make that request. You have not spoken to me in weeks. You have not looked at me. You married me out of duty, and I have accepted that. But you do not get to decide who I call my friend." She turned and walked up the stairs, her wet skirts trailing behind her. Alexander stood frozen in the hall, the sound of her footsteps echoing in his chest. Duty. She knew he had called their marriage a duty, but she did not know the rest. She did not know the truth. He had not told her because he wanted to protect her, and now his silence was destroying everything. The next day, Alina found an envelope on her writing desk. Inside was a single sheet of paper in Alexander's handwriting. It was not a letter to her. It was a draft of a letter that had never been sent. "To the Earl of Blackmore," it began. "I am aware of your intentions toward Lady Alina Grey. I know you hold her father's debts. I know you plan to force her into a ruinous arrangement in exchange for his freedom. You will not touch her. She is under my protection now. If you attempt to contact her or her family again, I will destroy you. This is not a threat. It is a promise." Alina's hands shook. She read it twice, 3 times. The Earl of Blackmore was a name whispered in shadows, a man of immense wealth and foul reputation. Her father had debts to him she had never known. She had been a pawn in a game she did not even know existed. Alexander had married her to save her. She sank into the chair, the paper trembling in her grasp. He had not married her out of cold obligation. He had married her to shield her from a predator. He had called it a burden, yes, but not because of her. Because of the threat. Because of the danger she had never known surrounded her. And he had never told her. He had let her believe she was unwanted. He had let her drown in loneliness. Anger flared hot and sudden. He had taken her choices. He had wrapped her in protection without her consent and called it duty. But beneath the anger was something else. Something that felt terrifyingly like hope. She found Alexander in his study that afternoon. The room smelled of wood smoke and old books. He was standing by the window, staring out at the gray sky. He did not turn when she entered. "I found the letter," she said, her voice steady. "The draft to Lord Blackmore." His shoulders tensed. For a long moment he did not speak. Then he turned. His face was pale, his eyes dark with something she could not name. "You were never supposed to see that." "No," she agreed. "You intended for me to believe I was a burden." His jaw tightened. "I intended for you to be safe. I intended for you to live without fear. Blackmore is not a man to be taken lightly. He would have destroyed you, Alina. He would have taken everything and called it a favor. I could not let that happen. So you married me without a word of explanation. You locked me in a silent house and let me think I was nothing to you." Her voice cracked, but she did not look away. He took a step toward her, then stopped himself. I thought if you knew the truth, you would feel trapped, obligated. I thought it would be one more cage around your life." "You were wrong," she whispered. "You were so wrong." Silence stretched between them. Then Alexander spoke, his voice low and rough. "I did not know how to be near you without wanting to tell you everything. And if I told you, I risked losing you to fear or resentment. So I kept my distance. I thought it would be easier for you if I remained a stranger." Tears burned in Aliner's eyes. "Easier. I have spent months believing I was invisible, that I was a duty you regretted." Pain flickered across his face. "I have never regretted you, not once. Every day I regretted only my own cowardice." Another crack in the stone around her heart. She pressed her hand to her chest. "What are you saying?" He closed the distance between them slowly, as though she might vanish if he moved too fast. He stopped an arm's length away. She could smell the faint scent of cedar and rain on his coat. "I am saying that I have loved you since the first week you arrived. I watched you speak to the servants with kindness. I watched you try so hard to find a place in this cold house, and I could not reach for you because I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid that if I let myself love you openly, I would not be able to protect you with a clear head, that I would make mistakes, that Blackmore would find a weakness and exploit it." He swallowed. "I thought I could love you from a distance and keep you safe. I was wrong." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "Yes, you were." He lifted his hand and with agonizing slowness touched her face. His fingers were warm against her damp skin. She did not pull away. "I am done with distance," he said, his voice breaking. "I cannot watch you slip away from me. I cannot watch another man make you smile when I have never had the courage to try." "There is no other man," she said softly. "Henry is a friend, nothing more, but he saw me. He spoke to me. That is all I ever wanted from you." The words hit him like a blow. He closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, they glistened. "I see you now. I see you, Alina. I see your strength and your grace and the fire you hide behind your quiet smile. I see the way you kneel in the dust for a child you do not know. I see the way you carry your loneliness without complaint. I see all of it." She broke then. The tears came in earnest, a silent flood, and he pulled her into his arms. She did not resist. She pressed her face against his chest and felt the rapid, unsteady beat of his heart. "I thought I had lost you before I ever had you," he murmured into her hair. "But I am here now, if you can forgive me, if you can let me try." She pulled back just enough to look at his face. The cold Duke was gone. In his place was a man raw with vulnerability, his eyes red-rimmed, his hands trembling. "I need time," she said honestly. "I cannot erase months of loneliness in one afternoon." "Take all the time you need." His voice was fierce and gentle at once. "I will wait. I will prove to you that my silence was never indifference. I will show you the man I wanted to be for you all along." And he did. He did not overwhelm her. He did not smother her with declarations. He simply began to be present. He joined her on her visits to the village. He sat beside her at dinner and asked real questions. He listened. He remembered the names of tenants she mentioned. He had the library reorganized to include the poetry she loved. One evening, a week later, they were walking through the garden at dusk. The air smelled of lavender and damp earth. Alina had been quiet, thoughtful. She stopped beside the old stone fountain and looked at him. "I was so angry at you," she said, "for taking my choices, for deciding my life without me." He did not defend himself. He just waited. "But I have begun to understand something," she continued. "You were as trapped as I was. You were fighting a battle I could not see, and you did the only thing you knew to do. You sacrificed your own peace for my safety." He swallowed hard. "I would do it again, even knowing it might cost me your affection forever." She reached out and took his hand. "You have not lost it. It was buried under hurt, but it was always there." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. The gesture was so tender, so reverent, that her breath caught. "I love you," he said, the words quiet and certain. "I should have said it months ago. I should have said it the day I married you." "I love you too," she whispered, "even when I tried not to, even when it hurt." He pulled her gently into his arms, and this time there was no hesitation. This time she rested her head against his chest and let the steady rhythm of his heart soothe the last of her aching loneliness. The healing did not happen in a single moment. It happened in small ways over the weeks that followed. In the way he left her notes on her breakfast tray, short messages written in his sharp hand. In the way she began to laugh freely at his dry, unexpected humor. In the way they walked through the village together, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm, no longer two parallel lines but a single path. One rainy afternoon, they stood together at the window of the library, watching the storm sweep across the valley. He had wrapped a blanket around her shoulders without her asking. She leaned into his side. "I used to dread silence," she said. "It felt like emptiness, but now it feels like peace." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "That is because you are no longer alone in it." She smiled. Outside, the rain softened to a gentle patter. Inside, the fire crackled warmly. The estate stretched around them, full of people who knew their Duchess as a kind and steady presence. And the Duke of Ashworth, once cold and distant, held his wife as though she were the most precious thing in his world. Because she was. And in the quiet of that library, with rain tapping against the glass and the scent of old books surrounding them, Alina closed her eyes and let herself believe in the life she had almost given up hoping for. A life where she was seen. A life where she was loved. A life where the pain of the past was not erased, but was gently, patiently, beautifully healed.